The nightmare always started the same way. Quang Tri Province, 1969. Rain hammering the mud like automatic fire, turning everything to slick red clay that clung to boots and soles alike. Marcus Callahan was 21 then, a Navy corpsman attached to the 1st Battalion, 9th Marines, and the world smelled like diesel fuel and copper. The ambush came at dawn. NVA regulars had set up along the tree line, waited until the patrol moved into the kill zone. The first burst of AK fire dropped 3 Marines before Marcus could process what was happening. Training took over. His hands moved before his mind caught up, dragging Private First Class David Ross behind a fallen tree while rounds snapped overhead like angry hornets. David was 19, farm kid from somewhere in New Mexico, always talking about his little sister Rosa and how he was saving his combat pay to send her to college. The bullet had caught him low in the abdomen, and Marcus knew immediately it was bad. The kind of bad where you work anyway because stopping means accepting what comes next. His hands pressed gauze that turned red too fast. David's eyes were wide, clear, looking past the canopy to something Marcus couldn't see. The kid's lips moved, barely audible over the firefight still raging 30 meters away. "Tell my sister. Tell her I love her. Take care of her." Marcus pressed harder, willing the blood to stop, willing the medevac chopper to arrive faster, willing God or fate or anything that might be listening to give this kid one more minute. "You're going to tell her yourself, Marine. Stay with me." But David's hand found Marcus's wrist, surprisingly strong for someone bleeding out. "Promise me. Promise." The words left Marcus before he could weigh them. "I promise." David Ross died 17 seconds later. The Bronze Star citation would say Hospital Man 3rd Class Marcus Callahan had saved 3 Marines that day through courage under fire. What it didn't say was that he'd failed to save the 4th, or that the promise to a dying teenager would haunt him for the next 50 years. Marcus jerked awake in the pre-dawn darkness of a Motel 6 outside Tempe, Arizona. His heart hammered against his ribs like it was trying to escape. 68 years old, and his body still responded to that jungle ambush like it had happened yesterday instead of half a century ago. The alarm clock on the nightstand read 5:47 a.m. Close enough. He swung his legs out of bed, feet finding the worn carpet. His knees popped, age catching up with all the miles, all the years in the saddle. The room was generic highway lodging, but through the window he could see 13 Harley-Davidsons lined up in the parking lot like soldiers at attention. Thunder Road Motorcycle Club, his brothers, his family. The shower ran hot, and Marcus stood under it longer than necessary, letting the water wash away the phantom mud of Vietnam. When he looked in the mirror afterward, the face staring back belonged to someone who'd seen too much and lived to carry it. Gray beard down to his chest, arms covered in ink that told stories he didn't need to speak aloud. The eagle and anchor of a Navy corpsman on his right forearm, Sarah's name in script over his heart. The Thunder Road patch, a lightning bolt splitting a winding highway on his left shoulder. Sarah, gone 10 years now. Not suicide like he'd let some people believe, but cancer, slow and inevitable despite everything modern medicine could throw at it. She died in his arms in their bedroom in Phoenix, morphine soft and telling him she loved him and that he needed to keep helping people. That had been her last coherent sentence. "Promise me you'll keep helping people who need it." Another promise, another weight. He pulled on jeans, boots, a black t-shirt, his leather vest with the Thunder Road patches. The Bronze Star sat in a small wooden box in his saddlebag. He carried it everywhere but never wore it. Medals were for the ones who didn't come home. Outside, the Arizona morning was just beginning to warm. The desert sky held that particular quality of light that happened only in the hours before the sun turned everything hostile. Samuel Preacher Johnson was already up, sitting on his bike and reading from a worn Bible. He looked up as Marcus approached. "Bad dreams again?" Marcus didn't need to answer. Preacher had his own nightmares from Desert Storm, where he'd served as an army chaplain and watched good men die while he held useless prayers on his tongue. They understood each other in that particular way that only combat veterans could. "We riding today or philosophizing?" Preacher smiled, tucked the Bible into his saddlebag. "Both, probably. That's what old men do." The others emerged gradually. James Doc Rivera, 55, former Marine turned lawyer, carrying coffee in a thermos he'd share with no one. Thomas Hawk Hayes, 45, youngest of the core group, Iraq War veteran with a prosthetic left hand he'd lost to an IED in Fallujah. Victor Wrench Chen, 51, the only non-veteran among the leadership but a man whose loyalty had been tested and proven over 2 decades of riding together. 8 more brothers joined them, a mix of veterans from different wars and conflicts. Men who'd found in Thunder Road what civilian life couldn't give them. Purpose, brotherhood, a reason to keep the wheels turning. They rolled out at 6:15, engines rumbling like distant thunder. Marcus took point, as always. The highway stretched ahead through the Arizona desert, empty and honest in a way cities could never be. Saguaro cacti stood like sentinels. The mountains in the distance wore their morning colors like old soldiers wearing their dress uniforms, faded but dignified. The CB radio crackled to life around 7 o'clock. Doc's voice. "Bear, you seeing this sunrise?" Marcus keyed his mic. "Seeing it? Thinking about all the sunrises we didn't see." Heavy thoughts for a Tuesday morning. Every morning's heavy when you get to our age. Preacher cut in. "Scripture says we're to rejoice in each day the Lord has made, even the heavy ones." Hawk's younger voice joined. "Preacher, you've been reading that Bible again? We talked about this. Someone has to keep your heathen souls on track." The banter continued, easy and worn smooth like river stones. This was what they did. Rode, talked, existed in the space between their pasts and whatever future remained. Some men golfed in retirement. Thunder Road veterans rode motorcycles and helped people who couldn't help themselves. The detour came at 7:32. Marcus's CB picked up a signal on the emergency channel, the frequency they monitored specifically for this reason. A woman's voice, terrified and breaking. "Is anyone out there? Please. I heard Thunder Road helps people. I'm in Copper Ridge. He's going to kill me." Static swallowed the rest. Marcus's hand tightened on the throttle. He pulled to the shoulder, the others following his lead. 13 Harleys lined up on the side of I-17, engines idling. "Everyone catch that?" Affirmatives all around. Doc pulled up alongside Marcus. "Copper Ridge is 40 miles east, not on our route." "It is now." No one argued. This was what they did. This was the promise Marcus had made to Sarah, and before her, to David Ross. When someone needed help, you helped. Everything else was just noise. They took the exit toward Copper Ridge at 7:45. The road narrowed, became less maintained. The desert here held a different quality. Harder, less forgiving. The kind of place where things died and the sand covered them up until there was nothing left but stories and bones. The CB crackled again. Same voice, clearer now. "Please, anyone. I don't know how long before he—" The signal cut out. Marcus's jaw tightened. Preacher pulled up on his left, nodded once. They'd been riding together for 23 years. Words weren't always necessary. Copper Ridge appeared on the horizon at 8:15, a small town that looked like it had been prosperous once, back when copper mining meant something. Now it had the hollow look of communities that had outlived their purpose but refused to die. Population sign read 4,200. Marcus had seen 100 towns just like it across the Southwest, places where people stayed because leaving took more courage than enduring. The town square featured a veterans memorial, black granite with names etched in gold. Marcus slowed as they passed it, his trained eye scanning the names by war. World War II, 6 Hartwells. Korea, 3 Hartwells. Vietnam, gaps where Hartwell names should have been but weren't. Iraq, Afghanistan, more gaps. Funny how the richest family's sons never seemed to serve. Doc's voice held no humor. He'd done 2 tours in Vietnam as a Marine infantry officer, earned his law degree on the GI Bill afterward. Men who'd never served but sent others to fight occupied a special category of contempt in his personal hierarchy. They found Rosie's roadside diner on the edge of town proper. Red vinyl booths visible through the windows, chrome counter running the length of the interior. The parking lot was half full, breakfast crowd, mostly older folks, and a few workmen in dusty clothes. 3 pickup trucks, 2 sedans, 1 sheriff's cruiser. Marcus noted the cruiser's number. 1, that meant the sheriff himself was inside. The Thunder Road bikes lined up in formation, taking up the entire front section of the lot. 13 machines, each one maintained with the same care a soldier gives his rifle. Marcus dismounted first, stretched his back, felt the familiar ache of hours in the saddle. The others followed suit, their leather vests and patches announcing what they were before a single word was spoken. The diner went quiet when they walked in. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Coffee cups paused halfway to mouths. A waitress near the register actually took a step backward. Marcus was used to this, the way civilians reacted to men who looked like they did. All the leather and ink and attitude triggered something primal, some ancestral memory of Vikings or Mongols or whoever else had shown up in your village wearing war on their faces. What they didn't see was the teddy bear Marcus kept in his saddlebag for scared kids, or the thousands of hours Thunder Road had volunteered at veterans' hospitals and women's shelters, or the fact that 8 of them had served their country and all 13 of them had CPR and first aid certifications. The diner's interior smelled like bacon grease and coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in. A long chrome counter dominated the center, flanked by red vinyl booths along the windows. Black and white checkered floor. Pictures on the walls showed Copper Ridge in its glory days. The mine operating, men coming off shifts covered in dust and pride. One section of wall was dedicated to veterans. Marcus's eyes went to it immediately, drawn by habit. Photos of young men in uniforms spanning 80 years of American wars. His gaze caught on one particular image, a Marine private, 19 or 20, Vietnamese jungle in the background. The face hit him like a fist to the solar plexus. PFC David Ross, KIA 1969. Marcus's vision tunneled. The diner sounds faded to white noise. That face, those eyes. He'd seen them go glassy and empty while his hands tried desperately to keep blood inside a body that wanted to give it all back to the earth. "Sir, can I get you gentlemen some coffee?" The voice pulled him back. Marcus turned. The waitress stood 3 feet away, menus tucked under her arm, name tag reading Elena in fading plastic letters. She was maybe 26, auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Pretty in an unassuming way, the kind of pretty that didn't know it was pretty because no one had told her in too long. Marcus looked at her face and the world tilted again. The bone structure. The eyes, green, same shade as spring leaves. The curve of her jaw. She looked exactly like Rosa Ross had looked in the photograph David had carried in his helmet. The resemblance wasn't coincidental. It couldn't be. "Coffee would be good." His voice came out rougher than intended. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she wrote on her pad, but her expression stayed professional. Marcus watched her move, saw the way she flinched when the door opened, the way her eyes darted toward the windows like prey, checking for predators. Then he saw the bruise along her jawline. Makeup covered most of it, but not enough. Not for someone who'd spent 20 years in emergency rooms learning to spot what people tried to hide. The shadow ran from her ear to her chin, purple-black underneath the foundation. Fresh, maybe 2 days old. Preacher slid into the booth across from Marcus. Doc and Hawk took the seats on either side. The others distributed themselves throughout the diner, not crowding, but present. They'd done this before, created a perimeter without making it obvious they were doing so. Elena returned with coffee. When she reached across the table to fill Marcus's cup, her sleeve rode up. The bruises on her wrist were unmistakable, finger-shaped, dark as thunderclouds. Someone had grabbed her hard enough to leave imprints. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he said nothing yet. "What's good here?" Elena managed a small smile. "The breakfast special's popular. Eggs, bacon, hash browns, toast, coffee's included. We'll take 5 of those. Take your time bringing them out." She nodded, turned to go. Marcus spoke quietly, just loud enough for her to hear. "Miss, I used to be an ER nurse for 20 years. Those bruises tell a story." Elena froze. Her back was to him, but Marcus saw her shoulders tense, saw her hand grip the coffee pot tighter. She didn't turn around. "I'm fine, just clumsy. Bruises on the wrist, arranged like that, that's from someone grabbing you. The one on your jaw is from a backhand, probably wearing a ring. The way you're holding your left side suggests bruised ribs, maybe cracked. None of that is clumsy." She turned then, eyes wide and frightened. Please, I can't. If anyone sees us talking like this, if he finds out. Who? Elena's gaze flicked to the windows, then back. I need this job. Please don't make trouble. Marcus leaned back, kept his voice gentle. We're not here to make trouble for you, but if someone's hurting you, we can help. That's what we do. Nobody can help. His family owns half this town. The door chimed. Lena's face went white. A man in his mid-30s walked in, tall, athletic build, dark hair slicked back with too much product, designer jeans and a polo shirt with the collar popped. He carried himself with the particular arrogance of someone who'd never been told no in any way that mattered. Elena turned away fast, busied herself refilling coffee cups at other tables. The man's eyes tracked her movement like a cat watching a bird. Then his gaze shifted to the bikers, and his expression hardened. Elena, back office, now! His voice carried authority that expected obedience. Elena's hands shook as she set down the coffee pot. Marcus saw her glance at the door, calculating distance and odds. She walked toward the back, head down. The man followed, his hand finding the small of her back in a gesture that looked possessive from across the room. That him? Preacher's question barely qualified as a whisper. Marcus nodded once. Doc was already pulling out his phone, snapping a photo of the man before he disappeared through the kitchen doors. Hawk's prosthetic hand rested on the table. The real one was out of sight, probably near the knife Marcus knew he carried. Easy. We gather information first. The kitchen door swung open. An older woman emerged, 60-something, wearing a waitress uniform that had seen better decades. Her name tag said Dorothy. She approached their table with the wary confidence of someone who'd been serving food since before Marcus was born. You boys need anything else? Information. The man who just went into the back. Who is he? Dorothy's eyes narrowed. You police? No, ma'am, just concerned citizens. Concerned citizens wearing gang colors. Motorcycle club, ma'am, not a gang. There's a difference, you. We help people who need it. And that young lady looks like she needs it. Dorothy studied them for a long moment. Whatever she saw in their faces must have satisfied something because her expression softened slightly. Dylan Hartwell. His daddy owns Hartwell Properties, most of the commercial real estate in Copper Ridge. Dylan manages this place and 3 others. Elena's been working here 2 years. He took an interest about 18 months back. What kind of interest? The bad kind. Started with compliments, moved to control, ended up where it always ends up with men like that. She tried reporting it once. Sheriff's his uncle. Nothing came of it except Dylan got meaner. Dorothy glanced toward the kitchen, then back at the Thunder Road table. Her voice dropped lower. There's one person in this town who tried to stand up to the Hartwells. Father Miguel Santos, the old priest. He's retired now, dying of cancer, same as Charles Hartwell. But 20 years ago, he witnessed something in the church. Charles Hartwell hitting his wife. Miguel tried to intervene, tried to get her help. The church hierarchy told him to stay quiet, said the Hartwells donated too much money. Miguel left the priesthood over it, lives in a small house on the edge of town now, still ministers to people who need him, but he lost his collar because he wouldn't protect an abuser. Marcus filed that information away. A priest who'd sacrificed his position for principle. That was someone worth knowing. He's still in town? Lives on Copper Street, little adobe house. Anyone can tell you which one. It's got the statue of St. Francis in the yard. He's the one Elena called on that CB radio. Miguel's been trying to help her for months, but without the church behind him and with Dylan's family running everything, there wasn't much he could do except pray and wait for help to arrive. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. The radio call that had brought them here hadn't been random desperation. It had been coordinated by a dying priest who still believed in justice. Tell Father Miguel we'll come see him after we handle this. Dorothy nodded, relief evident in her face. He'll be glad to know you're here. He's been praying for someone like you to show up. Marcus kept his voice level. She got family? Someone who can help? Mother died 3 years back. Cancer, no siblings, no father in the picture. Elena's alone and Dylan knows it. That's why he picked her. The kitchen door opened again. Elena came out first, eyes red but dry. Dylan followed, adjusting his collar. He walked past the Thunder Road table without acknowledgement. Went to the register, made a show of counting cash. His knuckles were bruised, fresh, like he'd hit something recently. Or someone. Marcus caught Elena's eye as she approached with their food. She shook her head fractionally. Don't. Please don't. The plea was clear, even without words. But Marcus had made a promise 50 years ago to a dying Marine. Take care of his family. He'd failed to find Rosa, failed to deliver David's last message, failed to keep his word for half a century. Elena Martinez, if that was her full name, if the coincidence was actually fate, represented a chance at redemption he hadn't thought possible. Dylan walked toward the door, keys jangling in his hand. He paused at the threshold, looked back at Elena. Don't forget, inventory tonight, 9 o'clock. Don't be late. The threat in his voice needed no translation. Elena nodded mutely. Dylan pushed through the door, climbed into a red Ford F-150 with custom rims and tinted windows. The truck's engine roared, too loud, compensating for something, and he peeled out of the parking lot. Marcus waited until the truck was out of sight. Elena, what's your mother's maiden name? She looked confused by the question. Ross, Joy? Your mother, was her name Rosa? Yes, Rosa Ross before she married my father. How did you? Marcus's chest felt tight. 50 years. 50 goddamn years of searching, and here she was, serving him breakfast in a dying town in Arizona. David's niece, the little sister he'd died thinking about. Except not so little anymore, grown, alone, trapped by a predator wearing expensive cologne. Did your mother ever mention an uncle? David Ross, Marine, killed in Vietnam. Elena's eyes widened. Uncle David, she talked about him all the time. He was her big brother. He died before I was born, but Mama said he was a hero. She kept his photo by her bed until the day she died. Why are you asking me this? Marcus pulled his wallet from his back pocket. Inside, tucked behind his driver's license, was a photograph. Creased, faded, carried for 50 years. He laid it on the table. 4 Marines in jungle fatigues, arms around each other's shoulders, grinning despite the mud and exhaustion. Marcus was on the left, 21 and invincible, in the way only young men about to discover their own mortality could be. Second from left, David Ross. I was his corpsman. I was with him when he died. Quang Tri Province, April 7th, 1969. He asked me to take care of his family. I've been looking for Rosa, for your mother, for 50 years. Elena sank into the booth seat like her legs had stopped working. She picked up the photo with shaking hands. That's him. That's Uncle David. Mama showed me pictures, but they burned in a house fire when I was 12. I haven't seen his face since. He talked about you. Well, about Rosa and how she wanted kids someday. He was saving his pay to send her to college. He died thinking about family, asking me to watch over them. Tears ran down Elena's face, cutting tracks through the makeup that covered her bruises. He would have hated seeing me like this, trapped, scared. Then let us help you. You don't understand what you're offering. The Hartwells run everything here. Dylan's father owns half the town. His uncle is the sheriff. The judge is Dylan's godfather. I tried leaving once, made it as far as Phoenix before Dylan found me. He was waiting at my apartment when I got back. He didn't hit me that time. He just showed me videos on his phone, videos of him following me for 3 days. Showed me pictures of the women's shelter I'd visited. Said if I tried again, he'd burn it down, with people inside. Doc leaned forward. I used to be a prosecutor, then a defense attorney. I know the law, and I know how men like Dylan operate. They rely on fear and isolation. You break either one, their power disappears. But his family doesn't scare me. I've stared down drug cartels and mob lawyers. Some small-town real estate dynasty isn't going to make me lose sleep. Elena looked around the table at these scarred, weathered men who'd ridden into her life like something from a different era. Why would you help me? You don't know me. Marcus touched the photograph, David Ross's young face smiling up from 50 years ago. Because I made a promise to your uncle. Because he died asking me to take care of his family. Because I failed to find your mother for 5 decades, but I found you. And because letting you stay in danger would dishonor every Marine I ever served with. The diner door chimed again. This time, a sheriff's cruiser pulled into the parking lot. A man in his early 60s emerged, tall, thick around the middle, wearing the weight of authority and years with equal discomfort. His nameplate read Hartwell, Wade Hartwell, Dylan's uncle. He walked into the diner, eyes sweeping across the Thunder Road members with practiced assessment. Then his gaze landed on Marcus and something shifted in his expression. Recognition, fear, guilt. "Folks doing all right here?" His voice tried for casual but missed. Marcus stood, slowly, no threat implied, but his full 6'4" frame making a point anyway. They stood nearly eye to eye, two men on the far side of 60, carrying different kinds of damage. "We're fine, Sheriff, just having breakfast." Wade's eyes narrowed. "You look familiar. We met before?" "Vietnam, 1st Battalion, 9th Marines, Quang Tri Province." Wade went pale. His hand moved unconsciously to his sidearm, not reaching for it, but just touching it, grounding himself. "Corpsman?" "Navy Corpsman Marcus Callahan." "You were there when Ross died." It wasn't a question. Marcus felt the pieces clicking into place, understanding blooming cold in his chest. "You were there too." Wade's jaw worked. He looked at Elena, then back at Marcus. "Outside. We need to talk." They walked into the parking lot away from the windows. Preacher and Doc followed without being asked. Backup that wasn't quite intimidation, but definitely wasn't friendly either. Wade's hand stayed near his weapon. Old instincts dying hard. "You remember that day?" Marcus's voice was flat, emotionless. "I remember every day from that tour. But April 7th, 1969? Yeah, I remember. Ambush at dawn. 4 Marines wounded, 1 KIA. PFC David Ross died in my arms while I tried to keep his blood inside his body. He asked me to take care of his sister. I promised him, then spent 50 years trying to keep that promise." Wade's face crumpled. 60 years old, and suddenly he looked ancient, like every one of those years had piled on at once. "I ran. Christ help me, I ran. I was 19 and scared, and the shooting started, and I left them. Left you. Left Ross. I know. How? Because I saw you. Saw you disappear into the jungle while I was working on wounded Marines. Saw you come back an hour later after the shooting stopped. Saw the shame on your face then too. You've been wearing it ever since, haven't you?" Wade's eyes were wet. "Every day, every single day, for 50 years I've lived with being a coward. Figured I'd at least be a cop, protect people, make up for it somehow. But the Hartwells, Dylan's father Charles is my brother. When he offered me this job, I took it. Told myself I could do good here. Instead, I just became a different kind of coward. Protected people who should be in prison. Looked away when I should have looked closer." Like with Elena. Wade flinched like he'd been struck. "Dylan's got problems. His father, Charles, taught him wrong. Taught him that Hartwell men take what they want. That power means control. I tried talking to Charles, tried getting Dylan help. But every time Elena or another girl tried to report, Charles made it go away. His money, his influence. And I let it happen because I'm still that scared 19-year-old running through the jungle." Marcus stepped closer. "You know David Ross was Elena's uncle. That girl in there is the family I promised to protect. You going to stand in my way?" "No," the word came out broken. Wade pulled off his sheriff's badge, looked at it like he'd never seen it before. The metal caught the morning sun. "I resign, effective immediately, and I'll testify against Dylan, against Charles, against myself if it comes to that. I'm done running." Doc pulled out his phone, hit record. "Say that again. For the record." Wade looked at the camera. "I'm Sheriff Wade Hartwell of Copper Ridge, Arizona. I'm resigning my position and I'm prepared to testify about corruption in this department and about crimes committed by Dylan Hartwell and Charles Hartwell. I've been complicit in covering up assaults, harassment, and abuse for the past 5 years. I was a coward in Vietnam, and I've been a coward ever since. That ends today." Doc stopped recording. "That's going somewhere safe. Encrypted cloud storage. If anything happens to any of us, it gets released to every news outlet in Arizona." Wade nodded. He looked at Marcus again, this time with something that might have been hope. Can you save her? Elena, can you get her out of this? That's the plan. Dylan won't let her go easy. He's not stable. The drinking's gotten worse. Charles has been talking about institutionalizing him, but Dylan's 34, he can refuse treatment. And when Dylan gets cornered, he gets violent. We've handled violent before. Not like this. Dylan's got 3 friends, other rich kids who think they're invincible. They've hurt people before, sent a guy to the hospital last year for looking at Dylan's girlfriend wrong. No charges filed, of course. Charles paid off the victim and his family. Preacher spoke for the first time. Sheriff, you just spent 50 years running from doing the right thing. You want redemption? Help us protect that girl. Wade looked at the badge in his hand. Then he dropped it in the dirt. What do you need? Inside the diner, Elena watched through the window as the sheriff, former sheriff now, drove away. She didn't understand what was happening, but she felt a shift in the air, like before a storm when the pressure changed and you knew something was coming. Dorothy approached her, touched her arm gently. Hun, those bikers, they're trouble, but not the kind you're afraid of. I've seen their type before. My husband was a Marine in Vietnam. That tall one, the one with the gray beard, he's got that same look Tom had. Like he made promises he's still keeping. They say they can help me, but nobody can help. Dylan's been getting away with things because good people stayed quiet. Maybe it's time somebody didn't stay quiet. Thunder Road gathered outside, a wall of leather and chrome, and contained violence. Marcus came back in, slid into the booth. The others took positions throughout the diner, not threatening, just present. A perimeter. Elena, we're taking you out of Copper Ridge. Today, there's a woman in Flagstaff who runs a cafe. Her name's Maggie Chen. She's one of us, Thunder Road family. She's also a survivor of abuse. She'll give you work, a safe place, time to heal. But Dylan will face consequences, legal ones. We're doing this right, by the book, but we're doing it fast. You're going to write out a statement about everything Dylan did. We're going to photograph your injuries. We're going to file a restraining order with the county court in Flagstaff outside his family's influence. And we're going to make sure he can't hurt you or anyone else again. Elena's hands shook. He'll find me. He always finds me. Doc leaned in. He found you before because you were alone. Now you're not. You've got 13 brothers who've seen combat in 3 different wars. You've got a former prosecutor who knows every legal trick. You've got a sheriff ready to testify against his own family. And you've got a promise made 50 years ago by a dying Marine that we intend to keep. Dylan Hartwell is a bully with money. We're trained professionals with purpose. There's a difference. I'm scared. Marcus's voice was gentle in a way that somehow made him seem more dangerous, not less. That's okay, fear is smart. But staying here, that's not fear, that's surrender. And your Uncle David didn't raise a family of people who surrender. Elena closed her eyes, saw her mother's face, saw the photograph of Uncle David in his Marine dress blues that had hung on the wall until fire took it. Saw herself in 5 years, still trapped, still broken, still disappearing a little more every day. Okay, one word, but it changed everything. They moved fast. Elena's trailer sat on the edge of town, 3 miles from the diner. A single-wide manufactured home on cinder blocks, surrounded by desert scrub and broken dreams. She'd lived there with her mother until cancer took her, then alone, then with Dylan's presence hanging over everything, even when he wasn't physically there. Thunder Road formed a convoy, Marcus and Elena on his bike, the others surrounding them. If Dylan was watching, and he probably was, he'd see his prey disappearing inside a wall of steel and loyalty. Inside the trailer, Elena packed with shaking hands. Clothes, photographs. Her mother's jewelry, not worth much in dollars, but priceless in memory. A journal filled with Rosa's handwriting, entries that stopped mid-sentence 3 years ago, when the morphine made writing impossible. Marcus stood in the living room looking at the walls. A photograph caught his attention. Rosa Ross Martinez in her 20s, smiling, holding a baby girl. Elena. Another photo, a Marine in dress blues, 19 years old, serious expression despite the youth, David Ross. Marcus's hand went to his own chest where his heart hammered against ribs that had somehow survived 50 years when David's hadn't. He was Mama's hero. Elena stood in the doorway to her bedroom, a duffel bag in her hands. She talked about him constantly, said he was brave, that he died protecting his squad. She never got over losing him. Sometimes I'd find her crying, looking at his picture. She named me Elena Rose, same initials as his name, David Ross, like he was still with us somehow. He was with you, through her, through the values she taught you. Bravery isn't the absence of fear, it's doing what needs doing despite the fear. You're being brave right now. I'm terrified. I know, brave and terrified often look the same. The roar of an engine cut through their conversation. The red Ford F-150 skidded to a stop outside, kicking up dust and gravel. Dylan emerged, rage written across his face in letters too large to miss. He had 3 other men with him. His friends, Wade had called them. Trust fund kids playing at being tough. Marcus stepped onto the trailer's small porch. Thunder Road materialized around him, not rushing, just appearing like they'd been there all along. 13 men, 8 of them combat veterans, all of them committed to a cause that had nothing to do with money or territory, and everything to do with keeping promises. Dylan climbed the steps. Up close, he stank of alcohol and expensive cologne trying to mask it. Elena, get in the truck. Now! She's not going anywhere with you. Dylan's eyes fixed on Marcus with the kind of hatred only entitled men feel when their property develops opinions. This is none of your business, old man. Actually, it's exactly my business. I made a promise to her uncle, a Marine who died serving his country while your grandfather was buying his way out of the draft, and your father was paying doctors to declare him unfit for service. I promised to take care of his family. She's family. So yeah, my business. You don't know who you're messing with. Doc stepped forward, held up his phone. We know exactly who we're messing with. Dylan Hartwell, 34, manager at Rosie's Roadside Diner, and 3 other properties owned by Hartwell Real Estate, son of Charles Hartwell and Caroline Brennan, nephew of Sheriff Wade Hartwell, who, by the way, just resigned and is prepared to testify against you. 2 prior assault complaints that mysteriously disappeared. 3 civil suits settled out of court with NDAs attached. You're not as scary as you think you are. You're just rich. Dylan's friends shifted, trying to look threatening. Hawk caught their attention with a particular smile, the kind that said he'd seen actual combat and these soft boys didn't register as threats. His prosthetic hand rested casually on his belt, the real one out of sight. Elena belongs to me. Marcus's voice dropped to something cold and final. Elena belongs to herself, and she's leaving with us. You can accept that, or you can try to stop us. But I promise you, son, you don't want to choose option 2. Your father is a real estate developer who dodged Vietnam and raised you to think money equals power. I'm a combat veteran with 12 brothers who've spent the last 20 years helping people your family hurts. We're not impressed by your daddy's bank account. Dylan's hand went to his pocket. Marcus saw the movement, recognized the shape of a weapon. Probably a knife, maybe a small pistol. But before Dylan could draw whatever he planned to draw, Preacher was there, his hand on Dylan's wrist, applying pressure to a nerve cluster that made Dylan's fingers go numb. Don't do that, son. We're all trying to keep this peaceful. Once weapons come out, peaceful gets complicated. Dylan jerked free, stumbled backward. His friends caught him. For a moment, Marcus thought it might escalate, but Dylan saw something in their faces, all of them, the whole Thunder Road crew, that made whatever calculation he was running come up short. This isn't over, not even close. He got back in his truck, his friends piling in after him. The engine roared, tires spun, and they were gone in a cloud of dust and impotent fury. Elena came out of the trailer, bag packed, tears on her face. He's going to come after us. You don't know him like I know him. He never lets go. Marcus took her bag, secured it to his bike. We know men like him. We've dealt with bullies our whole lives, in boot camp, in combat, in civilian life. They're all the same. They rely on fear and isolation. You break those, they've got nothing. I'm putting you all in danger, Preacher's voice was firm. Danger is our natural habitat, has been since we were young enough to wear uniforms. You're not putting us anywhere we haven't already been. They rode out of Copper Ridge at noon, the sun high and merciless. Elena held on to Marcus like he was the only solid thing in a world that had turned to quicksand. Behind them, the town receded into desert and memory. Ahead, Highway 17 stretched toward Flagstaff and something that might, with time and work, become safety. Marcus thought about David Ross, about promises made and kept, about how 50 years could pass in what felt like minutes when you carried guilt. But redemption, real redemption, happened 1 mile at a time. The road unwound before them, and for the first time in decades, Marcus felt something that might have been peace beginning to take root in the wasteland of his conscience. Behind them, in Copper Ridge, Dylan Hartwell sat in his father's office and made phone calls. To lawyers, to friends with less conscience than money, to people who owed favors and didn't ask questions. The storm was coming. But Thunder Road had weathered storms before. Flagstaff appeared through the heat shimmer like a mirage made solid. 7,000 feet elevation meant pines instead of saguaros, mountain air instead of desert furnace. Marcus felt Elena's grip loosen slightly as they climbed into cooler temperatures and thicker oxygen. The human body knew safety on an instinctual level, responded to it before the conscious mind caught up. Maggie's Cafe sat on Route 66, the historic highway that had carried generations of Americans across the continent back when roads meant freedom instead of just transportation. The building wore its age honestly. Brick facade from the 1940s, neon sign that probably hadn't been updated since Eisenhower was president. Victor Wrench Chen's wife had bought the place 15 years ago with money saved from 2 decades of waitressing. Now it fed truckers and tourists and locals who appreciated good coffee more than trendy atmosphere. Maggie emerged before the bikes finished parking. 54 years old, Chinese-American, 5 feet of compressed determination wrapped in a floral apron. She'd survived an abusive marriage in her 20s, escaped with 2 black eyes and a broken collarbone, rebuilt herself one day at a time. Victor had found her working at a truck stop in Nevada, recognized something in her eyes that mirrored what he saw in combat veterans. They'd been married 22 years now. She took one look at Elena, and understanding passed between them without words, the way survivors recognized each other across any distance. "Come inside, honey. Let's get some food in you." The cafe smelled like coffee and home cooking. Red vinyl booths lined the windows. Black and white photos covered the walls. Route 66 in its heyday, classic cars, travelers from another era when America moved slower and maybe noticed more. A corner booth held a collection box for the Coconino County Women's Shelter. Maggie donated 10% of her profits every month. Elena slid into a booth, exhaustion finally catching up with adrenaline. Maggie brought coffee without asking, and then scrambled eggs and toast. The simple act of being fed, of having someone care whether you ate or not, made Elena's eyes wet. How bad was it? Maggie's question held no judgment, only recognition. Elena's hands wrapped around the coffee mug like it was winter instead of June. 18 months. Started with compliments, moved to control. He'd check my phone, tell me what to wear, who I could talk to. When I pushed back, he pushed harder. The first time he hit me, he cried after. Said he was sorry, said it would never happen again. I believed him. They always cry the first time. It's part of the pattern. Remorse buys compliance. Then the remorse stops coming, but the hits keep coming. Was yours? My ex-husband put me in the hospital twice. The second time, my jaw was wired shut for 6 weeks. I lost 3 teeth. The only reason I'm alive is because a truck driver saw him dragging me into an alley and called the cops. Even then, my ex only got probation because his lawyer was better than the prosecutor. Elena stared at her plate. How did you move past it? You don't move past it. You move through it. Different thing. Past suggests it's behind you, finished, over. But trauma doesn't work that way. It changes you. You integrate it or you let it consume you. I chose integration. Took 10 years of therapy and a good man who understood that healing isn't linear. Victor came in from checking the bikes, overheard the last part. His hand found Maggie's shoulder, easy and comfortable. She still has nightmares sometimes. Still flinches when doors slam. But she's the strongest person I know. Strength isn't not having scars. It's having scars and building a life anyway. Marcus watched this exchange from the counter where Doc was setting up a laptop. This was what Elena needed to see, that survival was possible, that trauma didn't have to be the end of the story. But he also knew the story wasn't finished. Dylan Hartwell struck him as the type who'd rather burn the world than admit defeat. Doc's phone buzzed. He checked it, frowned, turned the screen toward Marcus. A Facebook post shared 300 times in the last hour. Dylan's smiling face above text that read, "Local woman Elena Martinez kidnapped by dangerous motorcycle gang. Family desperate for her safe return. If anyone has information, please contact Copper Ridge Sheriff's Department." Below, a photo of Elena looking scared, pulled from her employee file probably, or maybe from Dylan's phone. Comments ranged from concerned to outright hostile. Someone had already shared it to a missing persons Arizona group with 40,000 members. He's controlling the narrative. Doc's voice was clinical, prosecutor mode. Smart, actually, makes himself the victim, makes us the villains. By the time truth catches up, public opinion is already formed. Classic abuser tactic. Darvo. Deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. Marcus pulled out his phone, called Wade Hartwell. The former sheriff answered on the second ring, his voice rough like he'd been drinking or crying or both. "They're saying you kidnapped her. Dylan filed a missing persons report. My replacement, interim sheriff named Kowalski, he's talking about issuing an APB. Elena left voluntarily. We have her statement on video, dated and time-stamped. Doesn't matter if the lie spreads faster than the truth. Dylan's got money for Facebook ads, promoted posts. This thing is going viral. You need to get ahead of it." Marcus looked at Elena, who'd gone pale reading the post over Doc's shoulder. "What do you want to do? This is your story. Your choice how to tell it." Elena's hands shook, but her voice stayed steady. "I want to tell the truth. All of it. Everything he did. But not on social media. That feels like I'm playing his game. Can we go to the police? Real police, not Copper Ridge?" Doc nodded. "Flagstaff PD is clean, far as I know. We'll file a report, get a restraining order, document everything, build a case the right way." "How long does that take?" "Longer than we'd like. But trying to shortcut justice usually means no justice at all." They spent the afternoon at Flagstaff Police Department, a modern building that smelled like industrial cleaner and tired officers. Detective Sarah Morrison took Elena's statement, 3 hours of detailed testimony about 18 months of escalating abuse. Morrison was 40-something, seen-it-all eyes that still held compassion. She photographed Elena's bruises with clinical precision, had a female officer present throughout, did everything by the book. Marcus waited in the lobby with Preacher and Hawk. The police station held the particular quiet of institutions where tragedy was routine. A domestic violence poster on the wall listed warning signs. Marcus counted them off against what he knew of Dylan: possessiveness, isolation, jealousy, blame shifting. The kid checked every box. "You think she'll be okay?" Hawk's question held weight beyond its words. He'd seen friends break from PTSD, from trauma, from the weight of carrying things the human psyche wasn't designed to carry. Combat left scars, but so did abuse. Sometimes the scars look different, but cut just as deep. "Don't know, but she's got a better chance now than she did this morning." Preacher thumbed through his worn Bible, not reading so much as seeking comfort in the familiar weight of it. "Been praying on this, asking God why he allows men like Dylan to exist. Haven't gotten a good answer yet." "You expecting one?" "Not really, but the asking matters. Keeps me honest. Keeps me from thinking I've got it all figured out." Detective Morrison emerged with Elena. The young woman looked hollowed out, like the telling had taken something essential and not given anything back. Morrison handed Marcus a business card. "Restraining order will be processed tomorrow. Should be approved by end of business. I'm also contacting Arizona Attorney General's office. If what Elena describes is accurate, and the Copper Ridge Sheriff's Department has been covering for the Hartwell family, that's a civil rights violation. Federal jurisdiction. How long before FBI gets involved? Could be days, could be weeks. The wheels of justice turn slowly. especially when you're talking about small-town corruption. Rich family with connections, local law enforcement compromise. This isn't a quick fix. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Meanwhile, Dylan's out there telling his version, poisoning the well. Unfortunately, yes. Best thing you can do is keep Elena safe and document everything. Every contact, every threat, every violation. Build an airtight case. They returned to the cafe as sunset painted the mountains in shades of rust and gold. Maggie had prepared a room above the cafe, small apartment she usually rented to long-term guests. Elena stood in the doorway, looking at the space like she couldn't quite believe it was real. This is mine? I can stay here? Long as you need. Rent as you help me in the cafe when you're ready. No pressure, no timeline. Healing happens at its own pace. Elena broke down then, properly, the way people do when kindness catches them unprepared. Maggie held her while she sobbed, made no attempt to quiet or rush her. Sometimes crying was the only honest response to the world's casual cruelty and unexpected grace. 3 days passed in uneasy peace. Elena started therapy with Dr. Sarah Kim, a trauma specialist Victor had connected them with. The sessions left Elena exhausted but lighter, like she was setting down weights she hadn't known she carried. She began working morning shifts at the cafe, just coffee and breakfast orders, nothing overwhelming. The routine helped. Structure was its own form of healing. Thunder Road maintained a presence. 2 members always nearby, never intrusive, but definitely there. They'd done this before, protected people who needed protecting. The motorcycle club part was real, but so was the mission. They'd raised over $200,000 for veterans' causes and women's shelters over the past decade. The leather and patches were authentic, but so was the purpose underneath. Marcus spent evenings walking Flagstaff's historic downtown, thinking about promises and redemption. He'd carried David Ross's death for 50 years, worn it like a second skin. Finding Elena felt like a door opening in a wall he'd thought was solid. Maybe forgiveness, of himself, of fate, of God if he was listening, was possible after all. The call came on day 4. Doc's phone, number blocked. He answered on speaker. Mr. Rivera, this is Charles Hartwell, Dylan's father. I need to speak with you and Mr. Callahan, in person. It's important. Doc's lawyer instincts activated. Why would we meet with you? Because I have information about my son, about my family, about things that should have been stopped years ago. I'm dying, Mr. Rivera. Cancer. Maybe 6 months if I'm lucky. I don't want to die knowing I let my son become a monster. Marcus took the phone. Where and when? Copper Ridge Town Square. Tomorrow, noon. The Veterans Memorial. I'll come alone. You understand we'll have people there. If this is some kind of trap, it's not. I'm 65 years old with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. I'm not brave enough for traps and too tired for games. I just want to do one right thing before I die. The line went dead. Marcus and Doc looked at each other, running calculations about risk and reward. Preacher closed his Bible. Could be genuine, or could be exactly what we think. A trap. Only one way to find out. They left Elena with Maggie and Victor, took 6 Thunder Road brothers to Copper Ridge. The town looked different now that Marcus knew its secrets. The pleasant facade hiding rot underneath. They arrived early, scoped the square, positioned men at corners and exits. If Charles Hartwell wanted an ambush, he'd find Thunder Road doesn't ambush easily. Charles appeared at noon exactly, walking slowly, one hand on a cane. Cancer had hollowed him out. Tall frame that once carried weight now just carried clothes. He looked older than 65, looked like death had already started the paperwork. He stopped at the Veterans Memorial, stared at the names. World War II Hartwells, Korea Hartwells. Then the gaps. Vietnam, Gulf War, Iraq, Afghanistan. Places where Hartwell's sons should have served but didn't. My father dodged the draft, used money and a doctor willing to lie. I was proud of him for it. Thought it showed intelligence, not cowardice. Marcus stood 10 feet away, ready for anything. Why are we here, Mr. Hartwell? Because I'm dying, and because I raised a monster, and because 50 years ago men better than me died while my father bought his way to safety. I need to make this right, or as right as it can be now. Charles pulled an envelope from his jacket, Set it on the memorial. Safe deposit box key, Bank of Arizona, Phoenix, box 1847. Inside you'll find documents, payoffs, NDAs, proof of bribery, and evidence tampering. 5 years of my son hurting people and me making it go away. 3 women besides Elena. One of them tried to kill herself after Dylan was done with her. I paid her family $200,000 to stay quiet. Doc picked up the envelope, examined it. Why now? Why help us? Because I'm dying and hell seems more real when it's close. Because my wife left me when Dylan was 8. I drove her away with my fists, just like my father drove away my mother. Because I taught Dylan that Hartwell men take what they want, that power means control. I created him. And now I'm trying to uncreate the damage. Marcus studied the old man, seeing past the cancer and age to something raw underneath. Regret, real regret, the kind that lived in your chest like shrapnel you couldn't remove. What about Dylan? What happens to him? He goes to prison. He deserves it. But Marcus, Charles's voice broke. He's sick like I was sick. Learned it from me like I learned it from my father. If there's any way he can be helped, not just punished, I'm asking, one father to another, try. Elena comes first, her safety, her justice. Agreed, absolutely. But maybe breaking the cycle means more than just locking him up. Maybe it means helping him see what he became. Charles turned to leave, each step looking like it cost him. Marcus called after him. Your brother, Wade, he resigned. He's testifying against you and Dylan. Charles nodded, not turning around. Good. Wade's carried that burden long enough. Vietnam broke him, and I made him complicit in breaking others. Time he got free. He walked away, old man with a cane and stage 4 cancer, leaving behind evidence of his family's crimes. Marcus held the envelope, feeling the weight of what it represented. Justice, maybe. Or just more proof that money couldn't buy what mattered. They drove to Phoenix that afternoon, accessed the safe deposit box with a bank officer who asked no questions. Inside, 3 years of carefully organized documents. Each woman Dylan had hurt got her own folder. Photographs, medical records, payoff agreements, NDAs signed under duress. A separate folder detailed bribes paid to Judge Pearson, campaign contributions to Sheriff Wade's elections, cash payments to city officials. Doc spread the documents across a hotel room desk, his prosecutor's mind cataloging charges. This is RICO territory, organized corruption. The Attorney General will want this. Hell, the FBI will want this. How long to build a case? Weeks, maybe months. Federal investigations move slowly. They'll want to verify everything, interview witnesses, build an airtight prosecution. Meanwhile, Dylan's still out there. Unfortunately, yes. Marcus's phone rang, Elena, voice tight with fear. He's here, Dylan. He found me. Where? Outside the cafe. He's just sitting in his truck, washing. He's been there for an hour. Victor called the police, but they said since he's on public property and hasn't approached me, there's nothing they can do. We're coming. Don't go outside. Stay where people can see you. They made Phoenix to Flagstaff in 90 minutes. Speed laws treated as suggestions. The red F-150 sat across from Maggie's cafe, Dylan visible behind tinted glass. He didn't move when Thunder Road pulled up, just watched like a predator watching prey. Marcus approached the truck, knocked on the window. Dylan rolled it down. Up close, the deterioration was obvious. Bloodshot eyes, 3 days of stubble, stink of alcohol poorly masked by cologne. This wasn't the arrogant rich kid from the diner. This was something more dangerous. Something cornered. You need to leave. Dylan's laugh held no humor. It's a public street. I can sit here long as I want. Restraining order was approved this morning. You're not supposed to be within 500 feet of Elena. Haven't approached her. Just sitting in my truck. Not illegal. It's stalking. It's thinking. I do my best thinking in my truck. Dylan took a pull from a flask, didn't bother hiding it. You know what's funny? My father gave you the keys to our destruction. Called me this morning, told me what he did. My own father, betrayed by family. That's biblical, right, preacher? Samuel had approached during the conversation. Judas betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. Your father's trying to save his soul. Different thing. Is it? Or is he just a coward trying to die with a clean conscience? Dylan's eyes were wet, rage and grief mixing into something volatile. You think I don't know what I am? You think I like being this? My grandfather beat my grandmother. My father beat my mother. I swore I'd be different. And then I met Elena and she was so pretty and sweet and I thought maybe I could be normal. But the first time she disagreed with me, the first time she said no to something, his voice cracked. I became my father, became my grandfather. The monster was in me all along. Marcus kept his voice level. You can get help, therapy, treatment, but you have to want to change. I wanted to change, tried therapy 3 times. Quit each time because the therapist would say things that made me angry, and anger makes me hurt people. You know how many women I've hurt? Not just Elena. My father's documents, they cover 3, but there were 2 more before that. Girls in high school, college. Never went far enough to get caught. Just far enough to make them scared of me. Then turn yourself in, face what you've done. Dylan smiled, and it was the saddest thing Marcus had seen in years. I'm going to, but first I needed to see her one more time, not to hurt her, just to apologize, to tell her it wasn't her fault. She did nothing wrong, I'm just broken. Tell that to a judge, make it official. It won't fix what you did, but it's a start. You really think I can be redeemed? Preacher stepped closer to the truck. I was an army chaplain. Saw men do terrible things in war. Saw some of them find their way back to humanity. It's possible. Not easy, not guaranteed, but possible. Redemption is a choice you make every day, one right decision at a time. Dylan pulled out his phone, opened the camera. He started recording. My name is Dylan Hartwell. For the past 3 years, I've been abusing women. Elena Martinez, Jennifer Morrison, Sarah Chen, and 2 others whose names I don't even remember. I hurt them because I could, because my family's money and influence let me get away with it, because I'm a coward who learned violence from my father and grandfather. I'm turning myself into Flagstaff Police Department. This statement is voluntary. These men, he gestured to Thunder Road, they didn't force me. They just made me see what I really am. He stopped recording, sent the video to his own email. There, confession. Now it's out there, can't take it back. Good, that's good, Dylan. Is it? Because I still don't feel better, still hate myself, still want to hurt something because hurting is the only feeling I understand. Marcus heard the shift in Dylan's tone, recognized danger half a second before Dylan's hand moved. The gun came from under the seat, small revolver, .38 caliber. Dylan pressed it against his own temple. Maybe I just end it, save everyone the trouble. Don't. Marcus's voice carried command, the same tone he'd used on terrified Marines in firefights. You want to die? That's the coward's way out. Your father's dying slow from cancer, facing what he did. Your uncle resigned and is testifying against his own family. If they can face consequences, so can you. I hurt people. Good people. Elena didn't deserve what I did to her. No, she didn't. And shooting yourself doesn't make it better for her. You know what helps? You living long enough to change, to testify, to help put away every other bastard who covered for you. You want to honor Elena? Do the hard thing. Face justice. The gun stayed pressed against Dylan's temple for 10 seconds that felt like 10 years. Then his hand lowered. He set the weapon on the passenger seat, put both hands on the steering wheel, and cried like a child. I don't know how to be anything else. Then let us teach you. Starting today. Starting now. Flagstaff PD arrived. Someone had called 911 when the gun appeared. Officers approached carefully, weapons drawn. Detective Morrison recognized Marcus from Elena's interview. What's the situation? Dylan Hartwell, and he's confessing to assault, abuse, multiple victims. Gun on the passenger seat, unloaded last I checked. He's surrendering voluntarily. Dylan stepped out of the truck, hands raised. I did it. Everything Elena said. Everything in my father's documents. I did it all. They cuffed him gently, more procedure than force. As they put him in the patrol car, Dylan looked at Marcus through the window. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her it wasn't her fault. Tell her I'm going to try to be better, even if I fail. Marcus nodded once. The patrol car pulled away, carrying a broken man toward whatever justice looked like in this particular story. Father Miguel Santos arrived in Flagstaff 2 weeks later. 68 years old, Chicano, dying of the same cancer that was killing Charles Hartwell. He'd been the priest in Copper Ridge for 30 years before retiring, knew every secret the town held. Preacher had called him after Dylan's arrest, asked him to come help. Miguel met with Dylan in county jail. The young man looked smaller in orange scrubs, like the expensive clothes had been holding him up. They talked for 3 hours, Miguel asking questions that had no easy answers, Dylan responding with the kind of honesty that only comes when you've got nothing left to lose. Afterward, Miguel joined Thunder Road at Maggie's Cafe. His hands shook slightly, medication or cancer or both, but his eyes were clear. The boy is genuinely remorseful, also genuinely damaged. His grandfather was a drunk who beat his grandmother into submission. His father learned that behavior and improved on it, more subtle, more controlling. Dylan is the third generation of poison. He wants to change but doesn't know how. Marcus poured coffee, pushed it across the table. Can he be helped? I don't know. I've seen men find redemption in the worst circumstances. I've also seen men choose darkness despite every opportunity for light. Dylan's aware of what he is. That's something. But awareness without action is just sophisticated cowardice. What do you recommend? Prison. Has to be prison. What he did requires consequences, but also treatment, therapy, a chance to break the cycle. If he just goes to prison and comes out the same man, we've failed. We've just postponed the violence. Preacher leaned forward. You really believe a man can change that fundamentally? I have to believe it. Because if I don't, what was the point of being a priest? What's the point of faith if redemption is impossible? Miguel coughed, a wet sound that suggested time was running short. The boy asked me to give you this. He handed Marcus an envelope. Inside, a handwritten letter on legal paper. Marcus, preacher, Thunder Road. I don't expect forgiveness. Don't deserve it. But I want you to know I understand what I did. To Elena, to the others. I took their safety, their trust, their peace. You can't give that back. My lawyer says I'm facing 15 to 25 years. I'm pleading guilty. No trial, no dragging Elena through testimony. It's the least I can do. Father Miguel asked me what I wanted to become. I told him I don't know. I've been the monster so long, I can't imagine being anything else. But maybe in prison, with therapy, with time, I can figure it out. Tell Elena I'm sorry. Not because sorry fixes anything, but because she deserves to hear it. And tell her this, what I did to her wasn't love. It was possession. Real love, I'm learning, means wanting someone to be happy, even if that means they're happy without you. I'm going to try to be better. One day at a time, one right choice at a time. I'll probably fail. But Father Miguel says trying matters even when you fail. Thank you for not killing me when you could have. For showing me that strength doesn't mean violence. Dylan. Elena read the letter in the apartment above the cafe. Her hand stayed steady. When she finished, she folded it carefully, placed it in a drawer. Does it help, him being sorry? Marcus asked the question gently. Elena considered it for a long moment. I don't forgive him. Maybe someday, but not today. But I believe he's sorry. And I hope he changes. Not for him, for the next woman. Because if he doesn't change, there will be a next woman. And maybe she won't be lucky enough to have Thunder Road show up. You're generous. I'm realistic. Hate takes energy I don't have. I'd rather spend that energy healing. She looked at Marcus, this man who'd kept a promise to her uncle for 50 years. Thank you for everything, for seeing me when I'd become invisible, for believing me when I had no reason to be believed. Your uncle asked me to take care of his family. I'm just keeping a promise. It's more than that. You gave me back my future. That's not nothing. The federal indictments came 6 weeks later. FBI Special Agent Linda Crawford had taken Charles Hartwell's evidence and built a case that encompassed 3 counties and 15 defendants. Judge Pearson, Former Sheriff Wade Hartwell, city officials, business owners who'd paid protection money or accepted bribes. The carefully constructed system of corruption collapsed like a house of cards in a stiff wind. Charles Hartwell died 2 days after the indictments were announced, and hospice, morphine, Father Miguel performing last rites. His final words, according to Miguel, were an apology to his ex-wife Caroline and a request that someone tell Dylan he believed his son could be better than his father had been. Dylan pled guilty to 8 counts of assault, stalking, and witness tampering. The judge gave him 15 years in federal prison with possibility of parole after 10. Mandatory therapy, anger management, anything that might break the cycle of violence. The sentencing hearing had been quiet. No dramatic outbursts, no tears. Just a young man accepting consequences for damage that couldn't be undone. Elena didn't attend. She was busy working at the cafe, taking night classes at community college, building a life that belonged to her and nobody else. The nightmares came less frequently. The panic attacks still happened, but she'd learned to breathe through them. Dr. Kim said healing wasn't linear. Some days were better, some worse. The trajectory mattered more than individual moments. Marcus received a letter from Dylan 3 months after sentencing. Prison letterhead, neat handwriting. Marcus, my father died. Miguel wrote to tell me. I couldn't attend the funeral. Prison doesn't allow that for non-immediate family, and I guess I burned that bridge. But Miguel said Dad asked for me at the end, said he believed I could change. I don't know if I believe it yet, but I'm trying. Therapy 3 times a week, anger management every day. They have a program here, men working on accountability. We talk about what we did, why we did it, how to be different. It's hard. Looking at yourself clearly, admitting you hurt people for no reason except you could, but it's necessary. The alternative is staying who I was, and I can't do that anymore. How's Elena? I don't expect you to tell her I asked, but I hope she's healing. Hope she's found peace. Hope she knows none of it was her fault. Thank you for not giving up on me when you should have. Dylan Marcus showed the letter to Preacher over coffee at Maggie's. The older man read slowly, then set it down. Think he means it? Don't know, but I think he's trying. That's more than most manage. You going to write back? Marcus considered. Maybe, not today, but someday. If he's serious about changing, he'll need people who remember what he was and still believe he can be better. We do that for veterans with PTSD. Maybe we do it for this too. Elena came by to refill their coffee. 5 months since Copper Ridge. Her bruises had faded completely, replaced by healthier color and the beginning of smile lines. She'd gained weight, the good kind, the kind that came from eating regular meals and feeling safe. How you doing, hun? Maggie's question came with the ease of friendship earned through shared experience. Elena smiled, genuine and reaching her eyes. Good, better. Some days are hard, but most days are okay. I'm thinking about getting my own apartment soon. Maybe adopt a cat. That feels like something a person with a future would do. Marcus watched her pour coffee with steady hands. Watched her laugh at something Hawk said from another booth. Watched her exist in the world without fear written across every movement. This was what promises looked like when you kept them. This was redemption. Not erasing the past, but building something despite it. Outside, Thunder Road bikes lined the curb. 13 machines representing 13 men who'd decided helping people mattered more than comfortable retirement. The road stretched ahead, and somewhere on it, another person needed help. Another promise waited to be made and kept. Marcus sipped his coffee and felt, for the first time in 50 years, that the weight of David Ross's death had shifted. Not disappeared, it would never disappear, but it had become something he could carry without being crushed. Elena caught his eye, smiled, mouthed 2 words. Thank you. Marcus nodded. The road had brought him here. The road would take him other places. But in this moment, in this cafe, drinking coffee with brothers who understood what duty meant, he was home. The long road home. Finally, winter arrived in Flagstaff with the kind of cold that made memories sharper. Marcus stood outside Maggie's cafe watching snowfall on Route 66, thinking about how weather marked time better than calendars. 78 years old now, and his bones felt every one of those years when the temperature dropped. The arthritis in his knees made mounting the Harley harder each season, but he kept riding anyway. Some things you did until you couldn't anymore. 6 months since Copper Ridge. 6 months since Dylan's arrest. Tomorrow was the sentencing hearing. He'd been 21 when David Ross died in his arms, 68 when he found Elena, now 78 and still keeping promises. The math of a life measured in obligations honored. Elena emerged from the cafe, wrapped in a coat too big for her frame, probably Victor's, barred against the unexpected chill. She'd been working full shifts for 3 months now, enrolled in Arizona State's online social work program. Dr. Kim said her progress was remarkable, but Marcus knew better than to trust words like remarkable when it came to trauma. Healing happened in increments too small to measure until one day you look back and realize you'd traveled miles. You don't have to come tomorrow. Elena pulled the coat tighter. I know, but I want to, need to maybe. Dr. Kim says facing him might help, or it might set me back. Won't know until I try. What are you hoping for? She considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. I don't want revenge. I'm not wired that way, but I want him to understand, really understand, what he took from me, and I want to see if he's really changing or just performing change because it's what people expect. Marcus recognized the wisdom in that. At 26, Elena possessed clarity about human nature that some people never achieved. Trauma could destroy you or sharpen you into something harder and more honest. She'd chosen sharpening. They drove to Phoenix at dawn, Thunder Road forming escort, not all 13, just the core 5. Doc, Preacher, Hawk, Wrench, the brothers who'd been there from the beginning. The courthouse was modern glass and steel, built to impress rather than comfort. Inside, the marble floors echoed footsteps like judgments being passed. Dylan's attorney was expensive. Charles Hartwell's money, one last gift from a dying father. But the lawyer had nothing to work with. Dylan had confessed on video, pled guilty to every charge. This hearing was about consequences, not innocence. The courtroom filled with people whose lives had intersected with Dylan's violence. Jennifer Morrison, 32, who'd left Copper Ridge after Dylan's assault and spent 2 years rebuilding herself in California. Sarah Chen, 29, whose suicide attempt had been documented in Charles Hartwell's evidence files. 2 others whose names Marcus didn't know, but whose faces carried identical stories written in the language of survival. Judge Catherine Walsh presided, 60 years old, former prosecutor, reputation for fairness tempered with appropriate harshness. She read the charges with the flat effect of someone who'd seen too many cases like this, knew that behind every legal proceeding was a person's demolished sense of safety. Dylan sat at the defense table in a suit that hung wrong on him. He'd lost weight in county jail, lost the arrogance that had made him seem larger than his actual size. When he stood to address the court, his voice was steady but empty of everything except exhaustion. I'm guilty of every charge. I hurt people who trusted me. I used my family's power to avoid consequences. I became the kind of man my grandfather was. My father was. I have no excuse except that violence was what I learned, and I never tried to learn anything else until it was too late. Judge Walsh's expression didn't change. Mr. Hartwell, remorse is easy in a courtroom. The question is whether it translates to actual change. I've heard pretty apologies before. They mean nothing if the behavior continues. I understand. I'm not asking for leniency. I deserve prison. I'm just asking for a chance to become someone different while I'm there. The victim impact statements began. Jennifer Morrison spoke first, her voice gaining strength as she went. She described dates with Dylan that became interrogations, affection that became control, disagreements that became violence. When she tried to leave, Dylan had threatened her job, her apartment, her reputation. She'd fled Copper Ridge with nothing except the clothes she wore and the knowledge that staying meant dying. Sarah Chen's statement was read by her therapist. Sarah herself couldn't be present without risking psychological breakdown. The written words described systematic abuse that culminated in Dylan forcing himself on her after she'd clearly said no. She tried to report it. Sheriff Wade Hartwell had taken her statement and then filed it somewhere that ensured it would never be seen. 2 weeks later, Sarah had swallowed pills. Only her roommate's unexpected return had saved her life. Marcus watched Dylan listen to these statements. The young man didn't look away, didn't make excuses, just absorbed the damage he'd caused with an expression that suggested he was cataloging sins for later penance. Maybe that was performance. Maybe it was genuine. Time would tell. Elena's turn came last. She approached the witness stand with her shoulders back, head high. Dark Kim had prepared her for this, not by rehearsing words, but by helping her understand that her story belonged to her and nobody else could take it away. Dylan Hartwell hurt me in ways I'm still discovering. The physical violence was terrible, but it healed. The psychological damage, that's ongoing. I flinch at doors opening suddenly. I panic when men stand too close. I have nightmares where I'm trapped and nobody hears me screaming. Her voice stayed level, factual, like she was describing weather instead of trauma. But I want to say something that might surprise people. I don't hate Dylan. I pity him. He was taught wrong, raised wrong, became wrong. That doesn't excuse what he did. Actions have consequences, regardless of their origin. But I think he can change. I hope he changes. Not for him, for whoever comes after me. Because if he doesn't change, there will be someone after me. She pulled a folded paper from her pocket. This is a letter my Uncle David Ross wrote to my mother in 1969, right before he died in Vietnam. A Navy corpsman named Marcus Callahan kept it for 50 years and gave it to me 6 months ago. I want to read part of it. Elena's hands shook slightly, but her voice stayed strong. Uncle David wrote, "If I don't make it home, teach your children to be better than me, better than us, better than war. Teach them that strength is in kindness, not violence. That courage is in forgiveness, not revenge. That the measure of a person is how they treat those who can't fight back." She looked at Dylan directly for the first time. My uncle died at 19 for values he believed in. You're 34 and you've spent your adult life violating every value he held sacred. But he also believed in redemption, in people's capacity for change. So I'm going to honor his memory by hoping you prove him right, by hoping prison makes you better instead of just older. The courtroom held silence so complete Marcus could hear his own heartbeat. Judge Walsh's expression had shifted. Not softened exactly, but acknowledged that something unusual had just occurred. Victims demanding their abusers' rehabilitation wasn't standard courtroom procedure. Dylan stood without being asked. "Elena, His voice cracked. "I don't deserve your hope, but I'll try to earn it anyway. Thank you for being braver than I ever was." Judge Walsh let the moment settle before speaking. "Mr. Hartwell, you're sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Eligible for parole after 10, contingent on completion of intensive therapy programs, anger management courses, and demonstrated behavioral change. You will register as a sex offender upon release. You will be permanently barred from contact with your victims unless they specifically request otherwise." The gavel fell. Deputies approached to take Dylan into custody. As they led him away, he looked back at Elena one final time. She didn't look away, didn't flinch, just met his gaze with the kind of strength that comes from surviving what should have broken you. Outside the courthouse, Elena collapsed against Marcus like strings had been cut. He held her while she shook, not crying, just releasing tension that had been building for months. Preacher stood nearby, hand on his Bible, lips moving in silent prayer. Doc was already on his phone, ensuring the court records reflected everything accurately. This was what brotherhood looked like, everyone playing their role without needing to be told. "I need to go home now." Elena's voice was small, exhausted. They drove back to Flagstaff in silence, the kind of quiet that holds space for processing rather than demanding conversation. By the time they reached the cafe, Elena had fallen asleep against the truck window, her face peaceful in a way Marcus rarely saw when she was awake. 2 years passed in the way time does when you're rebuilding a life from rubble. Elena graduated with her associate degree in social work, began the bachelor's program. She moved into her own apartment, adopted a cat she named David. The nightmares decreased from nightly to weekly to occasional. Dr. Kim said she was one of the most resilient patients she'd treated, but Elena knew better. Resilience wasn't bouncing back. It was learning to live with permanent dents while still moving forward. Dylan's letters arrived monthly, forwarded through Father Miguel. Elena didn't read them at first. let them accumulate in a drawer like evidence of something she wasn't ready to examine. After a year, curiosity won. She opened them in chronological order, tracked the evolution of his handwriting from practiced to genuine, his thoughts from performative to honest. The earliest letters were careful, apologetic in the way people apologize when they want something. But around month 8, the tone shifted. Dylan stopped apologizing and started accounting. He described therapy sessions that made him see how his grandfather's violence had infected 3 generations, how his father Charles had tried to break free by becoming financially successful instead of physically abusive. But the control was still there, just better disguised. How Dylan himself had taken those lessons and perfected them. By month 18, the letters weren't addressed to Elena at all. They were addressed to himself, working through concepts that had no easy answers. What did it mean to be accountable when the damage couldn't be undone? How did you build an identity around something other than dominance when dominance was all you'd ever known? Could a man fundamentally change? Or was redemption just damage control with better PR? Elena found herself reading these letters with the clinical interest of the social worker she was becoming. Dylan was a case study in generational trauma and learned behavior. Understanding him didn't mean forgiving him, but it meant recognizing that monsters were made, not born. Marcus visited Dylan in prison on a Thursday afternoon in March. The facility was modern, clean, designed to rehabilitate rather than just warehouse. Dylan appeared in the visiting room wearing khakis and a polo shirt, prison issue but neater than his pre-incarceration wardrobe had been. He'd gained back the weight he'd lost, looked healthier despite being incarcerated. You didn't have to come. Marcus settled into the plastic chair across from him. I know, but I made a promise to Elena's uncle. And that promise includes making sure you actually change instead of just claiming to. How would you even measure that? By whether you're asking the question. Men who don't change never wonder if they're changing. They just assume they're fine. You asking means you're at least aware change is necessary. Dylan's hands rested flat on the table, a calming technique his therapist had taught him. Tell me about David Ross, Elena's uncle. You were with him when he died? Marcus hadn't expected the question. He took his time answering, calling up memories that were 53 years old but still sharp enough to draw blood. He was 19, farm kid from New Mexico, talked about his little sister Rosa, Elena's mother, constantly, how he was saving his pay to send her to college, how she was the smart one in the family, how he'd promised their parents he'd watch over her. But he died. He died doing what Marines do, protecting others. He took a bullet, pulling a wounded man to safety. Bled out while I tried to stop it. Last thing he said was asking me to take care of his family. Dylan absorbed this, his face working through calculations Marcus couldn't read. So you kept that promise for 50 years, found Elena, saved her from me. That's why you did all this. Part of it, but it's bigger than one promise. It's about who we choose to be when nobody's watching. David chose to be brave. I chose to honor that bravery. You chose to be cruel because cruelty was easier than being honest. We all make choices. My therapist says choice is more complicated than that my childhood trauma removed some of my capacity for healthy choice. Marcus leaned forward. Your therapist is partly right. Trauma shapes us. But you're 36 now, not 6. At some point, you became old enough to recognize the pattern and choose differently. You didn't. That's on you, not your father or grandfather. You think I can change? I think you're trying to change. Whether you succeed is a question only time answers. But trying matters. Preacher says God honors the attempt even when we fail. Dylan smiled, sad and knowing. Father Miguel says the same thing. He visits once a month, sits here and talks about sin and redemption and the difference between them. He's dying, you know. Same cancer that killed my father. Says he wants to see me find peace before he goes. Are you finding it? Some days. Other days I remember what I did to Elena, to the others, and peace seems like something I don't deserve. But my therapist says that's okay, that I can acknowledge I don't deserve peace while still working toward becoming someone who might deserve it eventually. They sat in silence for a moment, 2 men on opposite sides of a divide that probably couldn't be fully crossed, but might be narrowed through effort and time. Marcus thought about David Ross, about promises kept and lives saved and the strange geometry of how one 19-year-old's death 50 years ago had led to this conversation in a federal prison. Elena's doing well, if you're wondering. Dylan's face went carefully neutral, but Marcus saw the hunger underneath. I'm glad, that's all I want, for her to be okay. She's more than okay. She's thriving. Working toward her bachelor's degree in social work. Volunteers at the women's shelter twice a week. She's becoming someone who helps people recover from what you put her through. Good, that's good. Dylan's hands pressed harder against the table. Can you tell her something for me? Not an apology, she's heard enough of those. Just tell her I'm trying. Tell her that what I did to her made me see what I was, and I'm trying to be something else. Tell her she was right about generational cycles and I'm breaking mine. I'll tell her, but Dylan, trying isn't the same as succeeding. Trying is the admission price. Succeeding is years of work with no guarantee of payoff. I know, but it's the only path I've got. 5 years after Copper Ridge, Elena stood in front of a small building on the outskirts of Flagstaff cutting a ribbon. The structure was modest, converted house with offices, meeting rooms, kitchen. A sign above the door read, David Ross Memorial Center for Family Services. The center provided what Elena had needed 5 years ago and couldn't find: comprehensive support for abuse survivors. Legal aid, counseling, job training, emergency housing. Funded by donations Thunder Road had raised through poker runs and charity events, supplemented by grants Elena had learned to write during her bachelor's program. Marcus watched from the audience as Elena spoke about her uncle, about promises kept, about how trauma could either destroy you or become the foundation for helping others. She'd graduated summa cum laude 3 months earlier, already had her MSW in progress. At 31, she was becoming the person her uncle would have been proud to know. Maggie stood beside Victor, both of them beaming with parental pride despite having no biological claim to it. That was what Thunder Road did, created family from shared purpose and mutual respect. Preacher was there, grayer now at 71 but still riding, his worn Bible still in his saddlebag after all these years. Doc had retired from law but consulted pro bono for the center. Hawk, now 55, taught self-defense classes to the women who came through seeking safety. The prosthetic hand he'd worn since Fallujah had been upgraded twice, but he wore it like a badge of honor rather than shame. After the ceremony, Elena pulled Marcus aside. They stood in the parking lot watching the mountains catch sunset colors, the way they'd stood outside the cafe 5 years ago when everything was fresh and terrifying. I got a letter from Dylan last week. Marcus waited. He'd learned that Elena processed things at her own pace. Trying to rush her just slowed everything down. He's up for parole next year. 10 years served, eligible for early release if he demonstrates rehabilitation. She pulled the letter from her pocket. He's asking if I'd be willing to write a statement. Not supporting parole. He specifically said he doesn't expect that. Just describing whether his absence has helped my healing. What are you thinking? I don't know. Part of me wants him to stay in prison forever. But another part thinks if he's really changed, keeping him locked up just to satisfy my need for revenge seems wrong, petty maybe. It's not petty. You're entitled to want your abuser punished. But punishment isn't the same as justice. Kim and I have been talking about restorative justice, the idea that justice means repairing harm, not just inflicting consequences. If Dylan's actually changing, if he could help other men recognize and change their behavior, isn't that more valuable than him rotting in a cell? Marcus recognized the sophistication of her thinking, the way trauma had sharpened her into someone who saw complexity where others saw simple binaries. What does your gut say? My gut says I'm scared. Scared he'll get out and revert. Scared he'll find me. Scared all his growth is performance for the parole board. But my head says fear isn't always wisdom. Sometimes it's just trauma speaking. You don't have to decide now. I know, but I think, she paused, gathering thoughts. I think I'll write the statement. I'll be honest. Say his absence helped, that I needed space to heal, that I'm still afraid. But also that I hope he's changing, that I believe people can change if they work at it. Let the parole board decide what that means. That's generous. Elena smiled, tired but genuine. It's not generosity, it's exhaustion. I'm tired of carrying hate. It's heavy and it doesn't change anything. I'd rather spend that energy building this, she gestured at the center, than maintaining anger. 6 months later, Dylan's parole hearing happened without drama. Elena's statement was read into the record. The board deliberated for 3 hours, returned with conditional parole. Dylan would be released after serving 10 years, required to continue therapy indefinitely, register as a sex offender, maintain employment, and have no contact with victims unless they initiated it. Elena didn't attend the hearing. She was teaching a workshop on trauma-informed care to social work students at Northern Arizona University, building the life she'd fought for 5 years to create. Dylan Hartwell walked out of federal prison on a Tuesday morning in October, 10 years and 2 months after walking in. He was 44 now, gray in his beard, lines around his eyes that came from introspection rather than partying. His mother Caroline waited in the parking lot, the first time they'd seen each other outside a prison visiting room in a decade. She'd visited monthly for 10 years, rebuilt the relationship she'd abandoned when Dylan was 8. They'd worked through anger and abandonment and the ways Charles had poisoned their family with his own inherited toxicity. It hadn't been easy or pretty, but they'd done the work because the alternative was remaining broken. "Where do you want to go?" Dylan climbed into her car, still adjusting to being outside walls. "Tucson. I've got a job lined up at Habitat for Humanity, building houses." The parole officer approved it. "That's good. Honest work. It's what I can do. Work with my hands, help people have homes. Can't fix what I broke, but maybe I can build something useful." They drove south through Arizona landscape Dylan had forgotten was beautiful. Prison had its own ecosystem of concrete and chain link, made you forget the world had colors beyond gray and orange. The mountains looked impossible, like someone had painted them there as proof the universe could create things humans couldn't destroy. Tucson welcomed him with desert heat and careful anonymity. The Habitat director knew Dylan's history. Sex offender registry made secrets impossible, but believed in second chances the way Preacher believed in redemption. The work was physical, satisfying in its simplicity. You framed walls, hung drywall, installed windows. At the end of the day, you could see what you'd built. Concrete proof that you'd made something instead of destroying it. Dylan rented a studio apartment, furnished it with thrift store finds, lived quietly. Therapy twice a week with Dr. Benjamin Hart, who specialized in men's behavioral change. Meetings with his parole officer every Friday. NA sessions Tuesdays and Thursdays, even though alcohol was his drug of choice. The framework of accountability was what mattered, not the specific addiction. 6 months after release, Dylan received a letter forwarded through Father Miguel. Elena's handwriting measured and careful. "Dylan, I heard you were released. I'm not writing to congratulate you or welcome you back. I'm writing because my therapist suggested closure might help both of us. I don't forgive you. Maybe someday, but not today. What you did to me changed my life in ways I'm still discovering. I'm successful now. I run a resource center. I'm getting my doctorate. I help other survivors. But that success came at a cost measured in nightmares and panic attacks and years of therapy. But I want you to know I'm not consumed by what you did. I'm not defined by being your victim. I'm free, Dylan. Free in ways I wasn't even before I met you, because I had to learn what freedom actually meant. I hope you're changing. I hope you're becoming better. Not because you deserve it, but because the next woman deserves a man who's done the work. That's all I'll say. Don't write back. Just be better. Every day, for the rest of your life." Elena. Dylan read the letter sitting on his apartment floor, back against the wall, eyes wet. He didn't write back. She'd asked him not to, and respecting boundaries was lesson number 1 in his rehabilitation. Instead, he folded the letter carefully and put it in his Bible, the one Father Miguel had given him years ago. A reminder of what he'd been, what he'd cost, what he was trying to become. Dr. Hart asked about the letter in their next session. "How did it make you feel?" "Sad, grateful, ashamed, all of it at once." "That's appropriate. Those feelings are honest. What matters is what you do with them." "I keep working, keep trying." I don't get to stop trying just because it's hard or because I've been out 6 months. Trying is the rest of my life now. That's right. And Dylan, Hart leaned forward, his expression serious. You're doing well, better than most men who come through programs like this. But doing well doesn't mean you're cured, doesn't mean you can let your guard down. Behavioral change is maintained through constant effort. The day you think you're fixed is the day you become dangerous again. I know. My mother says the same thing, says I'm her son and she loves me, but she'll turn me in herself if I hurt someone. I believe her. Good, you should believe her. Accountability means accepting consequences, even from people who love you. 10 years after Copper Ridge, Marcus Callahan stood at David Ross's grave in the Arizona Veterans Memorial Cemetery. He was 78 now, officially retired from Thunder Road's presidency, though he still rode. His hair was fully white, his beard gray as winter snow, but his eyes still held the clarity of purpose that had driven him for nearly 60 years since Vietnam. Hawk had taken over leadership 3 years back, brought new energy while respecting old traditions. The club had grown to 30 members across 2 chapters, raised over $1 million for veterans and abuse survivors. Memorial Day services had just concluded. Flags dotted the cemetery like red, white, and blue flowers. Marcus had been coming here every year for the past decade, since he'd finally found David's resting place after 50 years of not knowing where his friend was buried. Elena approached carrying flowers. She'd asked to come this year, said she needed to meet her uncle properly even if he couldn't meet her back. At 36, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd survived hell and built a life anyway. The resource center had expanded to 3 locations across Arizona. Her doctorate dissertation on intergenerational trauma and rehabilitation had been nominated for awards. Uncle David, I'm Elena. I think you knew that, though, wherever you are. I wanted to tell you about the last 10 years. She knelt, placed flowers on the grave. Marcus stood back, giving her space for this private conversation. Marcus kept his promise to you. He found me when I needed finding. He helped me escape someone who was hurting me. He showed me what good men look like, the kind who protect instead of control, who build instead of destroy. Her voice stayed steady, professional almost, like she was delivering a case presentation. I help people now, people like me, people who got trapped by someone who claimed to love them. We've helped 217 women in the past 5 years. 17 men too. Abuse doesn't discriminate. Every person we help, I think about you, about how you died protecting people, about how that legacy kept going through Marcus, through Thunder Road, through me now. Marcus felt his throat tighten. He'd spent 60 years carrying David Ross's death, 50 years failing to find Rosa, 10 years helping Elena heal. This moment, watching her talk to her uncle's grave about the life she'd built from trauma's rubble, this was what redemption looked like when you finally stopped running from your past. Elena stood, dusted off her knees. The man who hurt me got out of prison this year. I don't know where he is or what he's doing, but I hope he's changing, because that's what you'd want, I think. You believed in redemption, in second chances, in people being better than their worst moments. She turned to Marcus. Thank you for everything, for keeping your promise, for being the kind of man Uncle David was. He would have been proud of you. I hope so. I'm proud of me, most days. That's enough. They walked back through the cemetery, past rows of white headstones marking men and women who'd served and died and been honored. Marcus thought about how many promises lay buried here, how many last words to medics or buddies or chaplains all had shaped the lives of the living. Thunder Road gathered at the cemetery gates. 20 brothers now, some veterans, some not, all committed to the mission of helping people who couldn't help themselves. Preacher led them in prayer, his voice strong despite 71 years of living and the wear that Desert Storm had put on both body and soul. Doc stood beside him, retired from law, but still sharp, still ready to fight battles that needed fighting. They rode out together, engines rumbling like distant thunder. The highway stretched ahead through desert that had witnessed generations of Americans moving west, chasing dreams or running from nightmares or just trying to find a place that felt like home. Marcus rode point, as always. Behind him, the Brotherhood. Beside him, Elena on her own bike now. She'd gotten her motorcycle license 2 years ago, said she wanted to understand what freedom really felt like. Ahead, whatever came next. His phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Marcus, it's Wade Hartwell. Just got out of prison, served 8 of 10 years for corruption charges. Trying to make amends. Would you be willing to meet? No pressure if not. I understand. Marcus showed the text to Preacher at a rest stop 20 miles down the highway. The old chaplain read it, handed the phone back. What are you thinking? Thinking people spend their whole lives running from mistakes or running toward redemption. Wade's running toward, that's something. You going to meet him? Maybe, eventually. Not because he deserves it, because David Ross believed in second chances. And honoring David means believing in them too. They remounted, continued south. The sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting everything in shades of amber and rust. Somewhere ahead, another person needed help. Another promise waited to be made and kept. The road was long and winding and endless, but that was okay. Thunder Road had always been about the journey more than the destination. Marcus thought about Dylan Hartwell in Tucson, building houses and trying to be better. About Wade Hartwell, emerging from prison into a world that would never trust him again, but might give him space to prove he'd changed. About Charles Hartwell, dead and buried, his last act of betrayal that saved more lives than his living had destroyed. About Elena, riding behind him, her laughter carried away by wind and speed and the pure joy of moving through the world unafraid. About David Ross, 19 and dead for 53 years, but somehow still saving people through a promise made to a 21-year-old corpsman who was now 78 and had spent his whole life trying to keep it. The road unwound before them and Thunder Road followed it, because that's what they did. They rode until someone needed them, helped until the helping was done, then rode some more. It wasn't complicated or sophisticated. It was just duty, the kind that doesn't end when your service does. Marcus felt the weight of David's bronze star in his saddlebag. He'd finally placed it on the grave today. Returned it to its rightful owner after carrying it for 53 years. The weight was gone now, replaced by something lighter but more durable. Not redemption exactly, not peace, but something approaching both, earned 1 mile at a time, one promise kept, one person helped. The sun touched the horizon and Thunder Road rode into the light, 13 souls bound by brotherhood and purpose, heading wherever the road led next. Because there was always a next, always someone who needed help, always another promise to make and keep. And that, Marcus thought, was enough. More than enough. That was everything. The engines rumbled, the highway stretched, the brotherhood rode on. Home wasn't a place. It was a promise kept, a life saved, a road traveled with people who understood what duty meant. Marcus had been searching for home since 1969. Turned out he'd been carrying it all along in every promise made to dying Marines, in every person helped, in every mile ridden towards someone who needed protection. The long road home, he'd finally arrived.